about the partners? Same kind of person? Different?
Gotcha. Well, it was like $15 or something, and I bought everything from Michigan's Adventure. So it's like, I don't know how I'm gonna hang on to all my stuff.
Hello, everybody. Is the mic working? I can't really tell. Yeah?
Gotta get very close to the mouth.
Is that better? Yeah. Test. Working a little bit. Okay. You gotta keep it close to your mouth. All right. Well, thank you so much for sitting in today to hear this conversation. I really think the siting of renewable energy in the countryside is one of the most important conversations we can have in our country right now. And so we have actually a tremendous panel here who come at it from a few different ways. Each one is very interesting, will really build on the conversation. So I am really, really excited and grateful for their willingness to take part in this. And my name is Jeff Smith. I'm with the Groundwork Center for Community Resilience. So energy experts predict that Michigan will need about 209,000 acres of land set aside to accommodate all the renewable energy that we're going to need to hit the goal. That translates to, if you divide that by 640 acres to a square mile, about 326 square miles of land. Maybe an easier way to think about that is a 1 mile wide swath of solar panels that would stretch from Sault Ste. Marie up on the Lake Superior shore down to where we are today in Ann Arbor. So that's a lot of land, a lot of countryside, and it really makes a statement that this conversation and deploying our landscape to get us where we need to be is just one of the most important things we're looking at today. So, in addition to my job at Groundwork, I'm also chair of a zoning board of appeals in a small northern Michigan township. And in that role, you can't do that for very long without realizing how much people in the countryside cherish the landscape. And you see it when you hold a public hearing about some new project that people may not like. And they just step to the mic, one after another, hour after hour, proclaiming their love for the landscape. It all kind of boils down to that. And that's no real surprise, right? For many people in the countryside, the landscape is not just a reason to, not just one of the reasons to live there, it is the reason they live there. And it's easy to see how that love of the landscape can convert into don't build it here kind of mindset. A friend of mine was the head of the planning commission in my township for a long time, and he was central to writing our master plan. And a few months ago, we sent out an e-blast from Groundwork, from our program director on the climate side, kind of loving up the package of bills that had passed that could speed the siting of renewable energy across the landscape. My friend is an environmental consultant. He's one of the first people I know to have had a really nice solar array at his house. I would say he and I align on pretty much every environmental and political thing. He received this email. He sent me a note at 7 in the morning, and it said, "Are you crazy? You want to hand the zoning of our township over to a bunch of Lansing bureaucrats? On this, we disagree." And I just read that note at 7 in the morning there and thought, we got our work cut out for us. So I suspect many in this room may have fought to stop a bad development at some point or another, right? But I suspect too that not very many people in this room have fought with equal passion and equal vigor to promote an industrial development, right? Promoting industrial development is not in the environmental wheelhouse, but it has to become that. Environmentalists must become extremely adept at helping people see that today the surest and the best way to protect the landscape that they love is to use a small portion of it to solve climate change. And if we don't, the fuels we have burned for 200 years will wreak havoc on every inch of landscape. So we have a powerful argument in our favor and lots of good things, but we have to move quickly. So today, we will hear from 4 people who will help us understand how we can move forward and use that landscape to kind of save itself, basically. So we have Peter Sinclair, one of Michigan's leading journalists, and I think it's fair to say Peter has tracked this issue more than any other journalist in Michigan. I like to think of good journalism as getting up close. To me, it's all about getting up close with journalism, and Peter is so great at that. He's brought that skill and that approach to his reporting. Deidre Echek is a Michigan dairy farmer, and she also is a consultant who helps other farmers promote regenerative agriculture practices on their farms. And again, getting back to that bringing it up close idea, just so pleased Deidre is on this panel because she can bring it up close on the farm for farmers. What are farmers saying when they talk to each other? I'm kind of really excited to hear that. Nicholas Jansen is my colleague at Groundwork, and Nicholas is working with electric co-ops, rural electric co-ops, to help get leadership in place or convince existing leaders to just go all in on renewable energy and just embrace it and kind of not hold it sort of at arm's length and really help speed the renewable energy transition using the power of the rural electric co-op. And Brendan is with the Brendan Miller is with the Land and Liberty Coalition, and the coalition is conservative based, and this is, I think, one of the most interesting things in this conversation we're going to have today, is some conservative groups in Michigan have been at the very forefront of promoting renewable energy in the countryside, the very forefront, and so I'm excited to hear what Brendan has to say, some of the things that he's been a part of. So we're going to start with Deidre. We're going to take it right to the farm and have her share those thoughts with us. And Deidre, if you want to step to the podium.
Hi, everybody. Thanks for having me today. So yeah, I'm a dairy producer with my husband and his family in central Michigan, kind of north central. And I think originally I was asked to be here because our facility has actually been the recipient of a REAP grant. So a year ago, we put up on a new construction of a barn build, array of solar panels. So it's a very important distinction to me that we put them on our barn roof, but they power a large portion of our dairy. So we've been under that system now for about a year and have been very, very pleased with it. So we are kind of what you guys would probably consider a large livestock producer in here, in this room. But when my husband and I first started operating it in 2014, there was 200 cows there. So we've kind of grown every year for the last 10 years about. So we've gone through all sorts of challenges in our growth, but measuring our electrical usage was definitely something that we were excited to kind of take on and to do. Also, along with my work as a dairy producer myself, I work side by side with other producers on regenerative agriculture practices on behalf of food companies and processors to try to help them bring their greenhouse gas reduction goals to the farm level. A fellow producer and I started our company, Regenerative Connections, a few years ago because what we saw was a lot of corporate goals being spoken about, but not having the ability to meet the farmer at their level and talk farmer to farmer. So we've kind of taken that conversation on and bring it down, work with them to find practices that work on their site, and then also to get them fair market payment for that extra work. So that's something I'm super passionate about at our own farm as well. We do a lot of cover cropping and minimal tillage and some revegetation of things. And so along with being a dairy producer, of course, I goes hand in hand with crop production. So I am a landowner myself, and I get the barrage of phone calls, texts, letters asking me about solar constantly. So I often just say, hey, we use our fields to feed our cows. So that's going to be a hard no for us. But in our township, they are pursuing every day acres, and it is neighbor against neighbor. It is not partisan. It is not like, it does not go with, everyone has a different opinion about it, and it is very, very hot topic in our township. You don't know where anybody lies on it, and you don't know who signed up, and it's an interesting dynamic. So I guess those are all the perspectives I have to bring to this conversation right now.
Thank you, Deidre. Brendan, would you turn this stuff on over? Brendan Miller.
All right, you guys hear me? Cool. Just so you guys are aware, I am a football coach as well, so if I start getting the locker room movement, just understand that's what it is, and I'm not trying to yell. So my name is Brendan Miller. I am with the Land and Liberty Coalition. Before I talk about Land and Liberty Coalition, let me just tell you about myself. I'm a farmer. I farm up in the thumb. I farmed for many years now. I shouldn't say many years. I farmed for about half my life. I'm also a former school board member and a former county commissioner in Lapeer County, so I've been able to see this from several different perspectives. And I've been with the Land and Liberty Coalition for the last 5 years. In fact, since the inception of the Land and Liberty Coalition, I've been involved. I was previously the Land and Liberty Coalition Michigan Field Director. Now I serve as the Deputy Director for the entire program. Who is the Land and Liberty Coalition? Well, first and foremost, we are a 501c3 education advocacy organization that, as was mentioned in the intro, leans conservative, which I'll stand behind the podium real quick in case you want to throw anything up at me. Which might surprise some of you. You might think, wow, a conservative organization, are they really conservatives? And I would say, yes, we are true conservatives. The reason we stand behind this messaging, though, is simple. 3 pillars that we help promote. One is property rights. The property rights of the farmer is paramount to township decisions. That's what we believe. We believe that personal property rights trumps mob rule every time. That's what we stand for. Another thing we stand for is the ability of communities that wish to have projects, to develop projects, to help their local economic development. The fact of the matter is, a lot of these communities that are looking to build these projects, or may have these projects built inside their communities, are communities that are, let's be frank here, they're dying. They're communities that haven't had real industry in the last 20, 30, 40, 50 years. It's a place where you drive downtown and you see a whole stack of buildings that are completely abandoned and empty because all the businesses that were there are gone. Where you're driving through the town, at the edge of town, you see the old factory that used to sit there for 40, 50 years and it's shut down for the last 20 years because the economy took a crap in 2008 and never recovered, right? That is a harrowing experience as someone who grew up in a community just like that. Small town communities, the communities that these projects being built in, are communities that are dying without the assistance of projects like this. They will continue to die until they whittle into nothing. The last important aspect of Land and Liberty's advocacy is also in regards to grid resiliency and economics in terms of rates. Fact of the matter is, a more diverse grid is a better grid, right? When we have more than just one set of electricity, it helps us all. Furthermore, cheapest form of electricity out there, it's solar, it's wind, and it ain't even close, right? It ain't even close. All what I just said might sound conservative to you, might sound nonpartisan to you. Either way, we speak to communities that are broadly conservative, right? Places that you're building these projects are voting 70, 80, and even 90% Republican. Going in there with certain messaging ain't gonna work. In fact, it will turn people off and turn people against you very quickly. Before I jump into a couple of the horror stories, I do just want to tell you about what we do specifically. We go to township meetings, which many of them are like these meetings right here, except normally when I'm speaking I get done and get a lot of boos. So I would appreciate, if you want to boo me, that's fine, it'll just make me feel at home. We also have educational events, so we do things called power hour presentations. So if you're a part of an organization, you want us to come out, we will come out for free, give you a presentation that basically talks about the myths and facts of renewable energy, talks about other forms of electricity to help you guys become more informed. So if and when questions come to you about renewable energy, you will be better informed on the issue, and you and your members will as well. We also meet with township officials, give them information to help them make the best decision in regards to renewable energy. In particular, we help to, as I like to say, inoculate them from the misinformation which exists out there. And whenever you hear about birds getting killed by wind turbines, raise your hand. Yes, all the time, right? All the time, right? It's not true, by the way. 250,000 birds on average, by the way, are killed by wind turbines. 2.5 billion killed by cats every year. So, if you want to really protect the birds, it's time Township start banning cats. One more thing I'll just say is just some of the horror stories so you guys understand the dynamics of this industry. I have been to over half of the counties in the state of Michigan, and I think I just did the totals, roughly about a quarter of all the townships in the state of Michigan, which is a lot. I've seen a lot. If there was a contentious project, wind, solar, or otherwise, I was probably there at some point. Casanova Wind Project, anyone remember that one over in Muskegon? I do. I remember I was there, and that's where we had some of the supporters got their cars keyed, and we had things thrown at us. I was at a meeting in Gratiot Township, in Fort Gratiot Township over in St. Clair County, where I got cornered by a bunch of people after I got done speaking, because there were roughly about 700, 800 people in that meeting who were all very angry at me. Not too far away, over in Livingston County, just to the west here, I was at a meeting. I spoke, I did my normal speaking, I was booed, you know, oh well, seems it is what it is, right? Start walking back, and a police officer who was there actually told me, hey, we're going to have to actually escort you out of here because we've gotten a lot of credible threats and we can't guarantee your safety. So they had to actually escort me out of the building. I'm not telling you this is scary, I'm telling you this to make you understand, I cannot be the only person at these meetings. I need more help. I need you guys to help get involved with the fighting for renewable energy, for the fighting for property rights. Farmers need it as well. As a farmer, I can tell you, we need help. Small farmers like myself, I am under 500 acres, which some might seem like a lot, but in farming terms is not very much at all. Farmers like myself, heck, the under 2,000 acre folks, they're struggling hard to continue to exist in the modern economy. They need wind and solar available for their properties to help them stabilize their farm incomes. The farmers need it, the communities need it, and of course, as you guys all know, the climate needs it. So I need you to help me make this a reality. So I encourage you throughout the presentation, feel free to ask me questions on it, and afterwards come up and talk to me about how I can help you get involved in your community to help make renewable energy an issue that is nonpartisan, but furthermore is an issue that's on the plate of every township in the state of Michigan. Thank you very much.
I think Brennan's done that before. Nicholas, you might come on over.
Hello everyone, my name is Nicholas Jansen. I am the Rural Clean Energy Organizer for Groundwork Center for Resilient Communities. I grew up in Rise Junction, Michigan, just outside of Jackson, down south here. I didn't grow up on a farm, but I was definitely surrounded by them. Traveled a lot throughout my 20s, and now I've landed in northern Michigan in Fife Lake, just south of Traverse City, because, like Jeff mentioned at the beginning, because of the landscape, the access to natural resources, and really just being able to be around people that want the same. And so when I think about what it means to be energy resilient and resilient communities, what does that mean for Michigan? That means three things to me. Engaged and informed people. Right now, a lot of people don't know how our electrical systems work in northern Michigan and other places. So we need to help inform people. Two, we need to have people be resourced. We're all struggling right now in our own ways. And in a lot of communities, they just don't have the time, capacity, or expertise to pursue new clean tech or technology if they just don't have the time. So we need to make sure we're resourced. And lastly, we do need to be planning for the future. Not where we've been, not where we're at now, but listening to the hard reality and planning for where we're going to go. Because as everyone in this room knows, we have some challenges to face, especially here in Michigan. The threats to our energy are the increases in storms, from our droughts and our floods to our intense winter storms to what have you. We are seeing those impact our infrastructure. So like downstate here with Consumers Energy and DTE, I was living in Lansing, I think it was 2018 for the polar vortex, when everyone had to turn their thermometer to 50 degrees because consumers couldn't keep up with the demand. Where was I? Well, anyway, and so we need to really work to start planning for the future, having different resources to go to when these storms hit. And so, what do we do about that? What does that look like in rural Michigan? Well, we have an interesting model of electricity generation in rural areas all over the country called rural electric cooperatives. Just a quick poll, who has heard of rural electric cooperatives? Okay, a good chunk of you. Is anyone a member of a rural electric cooperative? Nice, all right, welcome folks. I'm also a member. Anyway, just really quick for those that might not be familiar, this is very short, very incomplete of what a rural electric cooperative is. But contrary to like Detroit, DTE and Consumers Energy, which are for-profit companies, these are cooperatively owned. If you get electricity, you're a member, you're a part owner. And the reason that's significant is because you get a say in the direction of the utility. So these utilities are controlled by board of directors. And like most boards, you get a vote for them. And so by being able to vote, you're able to hold your leadership accountable, have a say in the direction it's going to go, and really increase that participation. And this is important because right now, our cooperatives in Michigan, we face a few barriers. One, there is very low participation in cooperative elections and governance. Less than 10% of all members turn out to vote for these electric cooperatives. We have 11 throughout Michigan, covering about 300,000 Michiganders. And so when you have that low of turnout, your board is not going to be accountable to you and your community. They're not going to be accountable to what your needs are and the struggles you're facing. So we need to increase, and this is why education engagement is number one towards resiliency for me. And then two, I'm going to check my notes here, I'm sorry. They are because of that low engagement, they are very opaque. We often don't know how these things are run. The elections are confusing processes. For Presque Electric and Gas in Northeast Michigan, they have a committee where if you want to be on the ballot, you submit your ballot. They have a committee that then decides if you get to be on the ballot or not. No one knows why. I couldn't figure out what criteria they use. That's not democratic. They're not being run the way they're supposed to. And that leads me to this third point, the third hurdle. A lot of these boards are being run as for-profit companies. They're cooperatives. They're not supposed to be for-profit. They're supposed to be for the members, for the benefit of the members. And one way we see that is just because these people, some of them that have been around, they've been there for decades. They're safe. They don't feel like they need to change anything. They're just where they're at. So what do we do? And this is, what does that mean? So with groundwork and with what I do is I support these rural electric cooperatives to adopt more clean energy. And again, going to those 3 points of resiliency, we do that by informing people like, hey, you're a member of a cooperative. Do you know you can vote? Do you know you can show up at meetings and have your voice heard? And we do a lot of stuff like that. Two, we also build relationships and engagement with the current staff and boards of rural electric cooperatives. Because we're not just wanting to talk to the most progressive folks. As we've already heard, this issue covers across the political spectrum. We need to know who is in line with us and who isn't necessarily against us. Because that then leads to point 3. We know that some people will never see eye to eye. And that's okay, because we're going to find a good pro-clean energy candidate, run them for office, and get you out. Because you're not representative of what we need. And so we're not thinking about rural electric cooperatives and the opportunity we have, especially with the IRA funding and like Build Back Better. We literally have once in a generation opportunity here to have our cooperatives in Michigan and across the country invest in these new technologies, diversify our grid to get ready for what's to come. This money is not guaranteed to be here forever, when we invest in power plants or solar plants, those are around for decades, just not for a couple of years. So we have this opportunity to engage our rural electric cooperatives, put pressure on them to listen and engage with the communities more, while also listening to the science, listen to the dollars that utility scale solar and wind are the cheapest, they are more reliable, and they will make us safer and more resilient for what's to come.
I just want to add one super short thing to what Nicholas said. We're a 501c3, we cannot advocate for candidates for government, but and this might apply to you if you're a 501c3, rural electric co-ops are not government. They're just private sector things. So we are free to advocate for board candidates if that might affect any of the work that you guys are doing. So Peter Sinclair, seriously one of the finest journalists Michigan has, and has tracked this issue really better than anybody. So Peter, looking forward to hearing what you have to say.
I will vouch for Brendan's conservative credentials. I've been collaborating with the Land and Liberty Group now for about 5 years, and these are folks that I probably disagree with on 80% of the issues, but as long as we don't talk about depreciated taxes or something like that, we get along great. We just talk about clean energy, and I will say Brendan and some of his colleagues are heroes. They are heroes because everybody that is doing this work, as he mentioned, has been threatened one way or another, sooner or later along the line. And that's why we need help. But just going through a few of the things that have been discussed here, Jeff mentioned 209,000 acres needed for clean energy, which sounds like a lot, and it kind of is a lot, but Michigan has 10 million acres of agricultural land. So we're talking about 2%. And you can compare that to anywhere between 7 and 10% that is being beaten to death for ethanol, which we all know is probably a net energy negative, okay? We're talking about something that is actually good for the land and good for farmers. Farmers want clean energy. They see it as a way to diversify their business, keep their farm in the land. Very often we're dealing with farmers who are third, fourth, and fifth generation on the same patch of land. And what happens is every once in a while they come up short on tax day and they have to sell an acre or two around their periphery to stay in business. And so somebody moves in there and builds a house. Pretty soon they've got a whole lot of people on an acre here and an acre there. And it seems like those people, many of them moved maybe from Detroit area or Flint or someplace, and they decided that the deed to the house also gives them a deed to the view of that cornfield across the way, which belongs to the farmer. They're not interested in helping the farmer pay taxes on it or anything, but they think they own it. And that is really the bone of contention that you run into in a lot of these meetings. The key is, if you want to preserve the agricultural character of communities, and you can look at communities like Gratiot County and Huron County and Isabella County where they've done this, they went in thinking this is a way we will preserve the agricultural character and the farmers in our community. Because if you think you want to preserve ag land and you haven't thought about preserving farmers' ability to exist and make a living, then you need to examine your priors, because you can't have one without the other. We've got to do something for farmers to help them. This is tough. So Jeff also mentioned, somebody called him about, Lansing bureaucrats making decisions about my land, blah, blah, blah. Well, I'm sorry, this local control argument wears very thin on me. There is no local control for oil drilling. There is no local control for fracking. There is no local control for gas pipelines. There is no local control for CAFOs. Where were all these local control firebrands for the last, 100 years or so? I don't buy your local control argument. Okay, come back to me when you can show some consistency. There are so many stories to tell about the benefits that are happening in these local communities. I've interviewed Jan Amsterberg, the school superintendent for Gratiot and Isabella counties, and he talked about how they were able to maintain their classes and their staff, and even upgrade with things like fiber optic internet, because they had revenue from the wind turbines. Bill Chilman is the school superintendent in Beale City, Michigan, where he says, you know, we've got turbines around here, we're starting to get solar, and you know, we can't keep houses on the market. People want to live here, you know, because now we have really great schools because we have funding to build world-class facilities, you know, whereas before we were struggling. And so the community is getting much, much better services without having to raise taxes, and so they like that. You know, and as these stories get out, I think we're going to get more uptake. And I'll give you a quick example. Again, so many stories. I spent some time in a place called Meade Township, which is way up at the top of the thumb in Huron County. Went to several meetings there over the summer. And this backstory there is 10 years ago, in 2014, they had a big wind battle there. So Meade Township was approached by a wind developer along with their neighboring townships, Dwight Township and Chandler Township. Now, Dwight and Chandler, sounds like a good name for a sitcom maybe. Dwight and Chandler said, yes, we'll write an ordinance that is friendly to wind, and we will welcome this development, and we'll set some ground rules for you, you know, to protect people in the community, and but we want to observe the property owner's legitimate rights. Now, Meade Township they saw what we have seen so often. They saw trained organizers from out of the area come in and spread a whole lot of misinformation and get people all stirred up, so, to the point where it becomes like threatening, it becomes like intimidating, and people get physically harassed. So what happened at that time was the board basically said, okay, all right, we'll write a restrictive ordinance, which is illegal, by the way, but never mind. We'll write a restrictive ordinance and we won't have wind. Okay, fast forward 10 years. Well, Dwight and Chandler are doing great. And the zombie apocalypse that was promised to them by the anti-wind people never arrived. You know, the only difference in Dwight and Chandler Township is that they're rolling in dough. You know, they've got so much money in their road fund, they don't have any roads. But they're ready if they ever need to build a road. Now, Chandler doesn't have two nickels to rub together. I was there for the Treasury report, and it was sad. You know, it was like Mayberry. You know, it was really sad. And they're looking across the road at their neighboring townships, and they realized somewhere in the last few years, we got snookered. We got snookered. So they set about a couple of years ago to write a reasonable solar ordinance, because they saw now solar is coming. And so that planning commission, which had some very good, very smart, reasonable people on it, passed a reasonable solar ordinance unanimously. And then a few weeks later, it went to the township board, and the township board, you could have knocked me over with a feather. After an hour of reasonable, polite, respectful, factual discussion, passed the ordinance. It was like 4-1 or 3-2. And so now they're going to get not just some solar that's going to pay tax revenues far into the future, but because Michigan now has, as part of this energy package, something called the Renewable Ready Communities Awards, they will get $5,000 per installed megawatt upfront, no strings attached. They get half up front, half when it goes into operation. But for them, this means about $300,000 coming right in the door that they can spend on anything. So this is serious money and a carrot that's on the table, and we're starting to see cooler heads being empowered across the state. It's early days, but I'm guardedly optimistic. Maybe Brendan would agree with me. I'm guardedly optimistic about how this is. There's some tough places. But people are trying to find ways to move forward, and so I'm hopeful, but I am also like Brendan. I want help, and like Samuel Jackson, I'm putting together a team. And so talk to me afterwards because people always ask me, what can I do? Well, I've got something for you to do. And we've got something to match everybody's superpower. So this is going to go way on through the election and into the future. So if you're interested in doing something in this area, which I honestly believe this is the Midwestern United States is the critical battleground that will determine whether we can pull away from the worst effects of climate change, but we don't have much time. And you are here, you live here right now, you have an opportunity to make an impact. So I would say don't let it slip away. Anyway, thank you so much.
I know to like downstate folks that live in bigger communities, 300 grand doesn't sound like a lot. But if you looked at like our little township hall and its old wood floors and whatever, you would know like 300 grand is quite a bit of money to Centerville Township where I happen to live. So thank you, Peter. Okay, we're gonna just do a couple questions up here, and we've saved a nice chunk of time after that for questions from y'all. And so let's get going on that. So I guess we'll start with this one. What have you seen as the most effective negative messages that have been used in shutting down, wind and solar? And then what do you see as some of the most effective messages that have been used to counter the misinformation? And Brendan, you want to start with that?
Yeah, sure. Thank you. Is it on? Yeah, you hear me back there? No.
We'll switch on the front.
Yeah. Hear me now? All right. So most effective negative, without a doubt, this is going to destroy my property values. You hear it all the time. People go, "Oh my gosh, they build this solar project, it's going to take my property values down to 50% of what they are." And I gotta say, there's no study that shows that ever. Never has happened. As Peter pointed out, there has been no apocalypse in the thumb, despite the fact that it was foretold in the 2010s that any community that put wind projects up were bound to see everyone move out, everyone to start getting cancer, and the grounds to vibrate, and God knows what else. So just basic, it just comes down to basic fear mongering though. And let's just be honest about all these conversations, all these myths that are thrown out there, things like, the birds getting killed en masse, cow abortions, I mean, you name it. I've heard it all. This is all legitimate stuff. The cow abortion thing, by the way, is very legitimate. People do believe if cows ride wind turbines, it causes them to have abortions and have all sorts of problems. Complete bunk, but very legitimate argument I've heard now in several different states across the country. But all that comes down to is I don't want to look at them. That's really what it comes down to. It's just I don't want to look at them. Let me find a reason why not to look at them. Well, it's not just because I'm selfish and I don't want to look at them. It's because it's going to destroy the groundwater. It's because it's going to destroy my property values. It's because it's going to create an electromagnetic field that can cook us in the middle of the night. All things I've heard, by the way. So that's what it comes down to. Is just I don't want to look at them. Let me find a reason to encourage my neighbors not to, and let me freak everybody out, which happens all the time. The amount of times I've seen the professional people, like Peter points out, going around making old ladies freak out and cry because they think their entire livelihood is done and their family's life is done because these things are coming to the community is sickening. On the flip side, I think the most positive arguments that I've used is the one I talked about before, property rights. It's really hard for a conservative who sits on name your township board in rural conservative Michigan to say, oh yeah, you know what, me as the government, I can tell you what to do with your property, not you decide what to do with your own property. That's a hard argument for them to get around. They try to find ways, but they don't succeed very often. So that's a very positive one. And then the second one is just comes down to energy affordability. So those are the big ones. So best argument against, without doubt, is I don't want to look at them and then name your various BS claim that they'll come up with. And then the positive side is, the farmer wants to build on the property, it's their right to build on the property, and you, being the township chair of the township government, do not have the right to tell him he cannot do that with his own property, or he or she. So that's what I'll say on that issue.
I'll just add one thing.
Yep.
Everything Brendan said, I'm totally on board with. I'll just add that as he said, people say, I don't want to look at it. Well, what does that boil down to? Because some people look at, say, a wind turbine and they say, wow, that's kind of majestic. That's pretty damn cool, But for the shrewd, evil brilliance of the fossil fuel persuasion industry, and it is a industry, has been to cast this as a culture war issue. Okay, so I remember seeing a meme on social media, and this was about 12 years ago, and it had a big picture of like dangerous looking wind turbines, and it said the production tax credit, that's a subsidy that wind turbines get. The production tax credit, Obamacare's worst tax. What does Obamacare have to do with wind turbines, you may ask? The answer is nothing. But back then, Obamacare was unpopular, and there was just this culture war kind of meme to try to tie two completely dissimilar things together, but create that negative image in people's minds. So for a lot of people, when they see a wind turbine, they don't just see a wind turbine, they see AOC and the transgender agenda, and it makes them crazy, So we have to start putting out a little more accurate messages that, first of all, these things are benign, and second of all, they support all of the services in a local community that really makes life livable. All of the things that we take for granted maybe in urban areas, but are sometimes in decay in rural areas. So that's what I would add.
Thank you, Peter. Okay, we have about 15 minutes left, so why don't we open it up to questions in the audience?
This one's more for Deirdre, I think. We have some controversy among the different environmental groups about whether methane biogas is a legit source of clean energy or that it's just a way to make more CAFOs, which not my argument, by the way, but where do you guys fall on the use of the vast amounts of manure we make as a way to make some clean energy?
I don't think I mentioned at the beginning that I'm also a regulatory consultant and I work directly with CAFOs. So I support CAFOs and helping them meet compliance with their manure management systems, and there is a movement towards putting digesters in. Oftentimes that's an outside company that comes and puts them on site, and then they pay the producer for that manure, and they create the methane that is then sold into the system. It is interesting because the scale of it requires that there be enough cows there. It's not creating CAFOs, I don't think, because the CAFOs exist. It might be supporting those CAFOs in ways that smaller sized facilities don't have access to. I don't know if that fully answers your question.
What are CAFOs?
Concentrated animal feeding operations.
So CAFOs are large livestock producers, generally 700 plus cows, and then also hog farms too.
And if I just may add one more part to that, one thing that I love about this panel, about this work, is like, it's not cut and dry. We're gonna have differences in opinions, and it looks different for community to community, and that's why I think one of the most important part is that community engagement and education, because it is gonna mean something different for every community. So one community might not make sense, another community might make sense. And so that's one of those that's definitely more on the fence depending on who you talk to, but I think the most important thing for rural communities is just getting them involved and helping them make their own decisions.
Hi, I was wondering if you would consider rural electric cooperatives a better model for energy democracy than investor-owned utilities, and if it's possible to create one of them.
Well, I'm obviously biased. I love cooperatives. I think it incentivizes people to be engaged, incentivize them to be informed, and it can really help create the future that we want and that community wants. I'm not exactly sure the best way to go about creating that model with other industries, and especially because rural electric cooperatives, they are created during the 30s when the rest of the country was being electrified. The New Deal program helped create these programs to create this. So unless we get some other incentives or something like that, I'm not sure how that can happen organically. But I don't.
Hi. Hi guys, thank you so much for your talk. First I wanted to say a special thank you to Brendan for coming out to Ann Arbor. It's a really authentic place. I really appreciate that. I think that coming together in our shared interests like this is really a critical part of the civic process. And I personally respect the hell out of your work, working both in the conservative space and coming to the liberal town of Ann Arbor. So thank you so much. I really appreciate that. My question is for Deirdre. I have some experience working in agricultural row crop sustainability in Lenawee County. And I know that terms like regenerative agriculture and climate smart agriculture can be really contentious among agricultural producers in traditional farming communities. And so I'm wondering if there are any lessons to be learned from your work in that space applied to the proliferation of renewable energy in rural areas.
Yeah, it's something I'm super excited about. It costs money to enter that space. So it's hard to ask producers to do things voluntarily without giving them some kind of financial success or reward or credibility or credit, I guess, for doing that. So, you have your super traditional agriculture, and then you have your, small kind of scale regen type stuff, and then you've got a lot of people in that space in between, or people who are moving to that space. So what my company that I've started with another one of my producers is trying to do is break down those barriers of the financial area to get people to go out of the box, try something new. Regen agriculture, the cover cropping systems, is multi-year. So it takes a little bit of time to get complete buy-in. So patience is one of those things, and it's a lot easier to be patient if you're getting a check, or something for it. So yeah, I think that's one of the things, as rural folk, everyone's okay, just do these things. It's not as simple as just do these things. It's part of a greater system that requires time, energy, money, etc.
Thank you so much for being here, all of you. My question is in regard to the two largest utilities in the state, Consumers Energy, DTE. Obviously, they both have climate goals that they need to reach in terms of renewables. Could you talk from your experiences about what that working relationship is like, either directly or what you've seen in the communities where they're needing to find solar and wind? Thank you.
Yeah, I can address a little bit of that, and I think Peter might want to jump into. First and foremost as well, for the previous comment, I'm actually an MSU student as well, so it's doubly.
MSU grad.
So, go green. But in regards to the question, DT and consumers, we have worked with them on the ground in many cases, and it's kind of interesting because we also work with an organization called MICEP, the Michigan Conservative Energy Forum, which is oftentimes sort of in friction with the utilities a lot of times. Yet in this regard, we're on the same page. They want to meet their goals. They have goals they have to meet. And I would say for the most part, the utilities are on the forefront, particularly DT, I would say is definitely on the forefront of the renewable energy space, trying to find and expand their footprint, particularly on solar and a little bit on wind. Consumers as well, I've just seen DT a little bit more, especially in my particular neck of the woods. But they're building a lot of projects, and they're also purchasing a lot of projects, and they're definitely embracing their goals and attempting to reach those goals, from what I've seen in countless counties across the state. I don't know, Peter, you have anything to add on that?
Yeah.
I figured.
Well, so I grew up in Midland, Michigan, all right, which is the headquarters of Dow Chemical Company. So I kind of have a close-up experience with what a big corporation, a gigantic corporation is like. They are not, they're not monolithic. So, DTE is a, I don't know, $10 billion, $20 billion company with 10,000 employees. And within that, there are a whole bunch of different little interest groups, and Brendan and I are working with maybe, I don't know, can't be more than 50 people that are really kind of the tip of the spear for what our energy system has got to go to. And these people tend to be high integrity, committed, they're serious about clean energy. They know why they're making clean energy. And the cool thing for them is that they've got the resources that they can do a complete job from beginning to end, and then typically they will own these projects, so they commit to being neighbors for 30 years. And so it is in their interest to just, do things right. I was up in Mason County at a consumer's energy project up there, wind project that's 10, 12 years old, and it's immaculate. It is beautiful. It is so well maintained and just operating beautifully, and I was so impressed. Having said that, these big utilities do things that if I was running it, I would say, let's not. They have legacy interests in natural gas and pipelines, and because of the way that we or our grandparents in their wisdom first chartered these guys, these monopoly utilities, they have a set of incentives that sort of drives them in a certain way, which makes them want to see themselves as the sole generators of power. And so they tend to see every problem as, well, we've got a power plant for that, rather than, I think what they need to do is evolve and see themselves as energy service providers. So that would get them involved in much more in things like efficiency and things like community solar, which is a big contentious issue, and small scale like rooftop solar and things like that. All of these things which we're going to have to work through in the future, but the technology is leading the way. 15 years ago, the technology and the economics of large wind and solar systems became manifestly apparent to utilities. They said, oh, we get it, we can build this and make money on it. So we got them to that point. Now the next barrier is to get them to the next point so that we can kind of open up things for community solar and small producers locally. So it's a mixed bag, but they are our allies, and we need them, and we just need to work with them in an intelligent way.
Hi, thank you all for being here today. I think this question is primarily for Peter, but anyone feel free to chime in. You had mentioned that you're tired of the local control argument because no other energy infrastructure has local control. But we know that those industries have been very extractive of communities. And so I'm curious of your opinion on how do we ensure that we're not repeating the injustices of these industries with the placement of renewable energy today?
Well, okay, so the renewable industries are by nature much more benign. You're not burning anything, and you're not pulling any hydrocarbon out of the ground. You're not going to be, there is no possibility of, say, polluting groundwater. Although, you know, Cousin Fuzzy's Facebook page, despite what they say, you know. There's a fascinating study that just came out of Argonne National Laboratory, where they looked at 2 solar fields in southern Minnesota that were done on farm ground, planted with native plants and pollinators, which is standard practice nowadays. They followed them for 4 years. And what they found was like a huge increase in the number of native plant species on that soil. They found a huge increase in beneficial agricultural insects, including native bees multiplied by a factor of 20 times more native bees. And in addition to that, there are long-term benefits to that soil because the native plants have very deep roots. They draw water down into aquifers. They can actually, over time, cleanse aquifers that are contaminated with farm chemicals and fertilizers. They can, of course, sequester nutrients and carbon. And so you're looking at the potential for fields in 30 years that the soil quality is actually much, much better. Should someone in the family say, well, I want to take a crack at farming like Grandpa, you know, that field would now be in a much better shape than it would be if you kept pounding it with chemicalized corn for 30 years. And of course, wind turbines take up such a small footprint that the farmers can just keep operating right around them. So if it's a dairy operation, particularly works well with dairy, or you know, a cornfield or whatever you may have. So yeah, the thing about fossil fuel is like when it is operating correctly as designed, you are burning stuff and emitting toxic effluent. That is not the case with clean energy. So it's really it's kind of a break from what we've done in the past. And no technology has zero impact, but the clean technology's impact is just a whole order of magnitude lighter than what we've seen.
Hey, can I just throw a 30-second thing in there?
Yep.
Just a quick little thing on that as well. So from the conservative perspective, I'm not super fan of the state law. With that being said though, and I think there's some gaps that need to be corrected in it if we want to make sure this thing actually works correctly. With that being said, at the same time, it didn't oppose the passage of it because of what they were doing on the ground. Just so you guys understand, they were putting 1,000-foot setbacks on solar panels. They were putting mile setbacks on wind turbines. The people who complain about local control getting stripped away are the same people that caused it to happen in the first place because, as Peter pointed out, making those restrictions, so prohibitive, exclusionary restrictions, were actually illegal under Michigan state law. You cannot have prohibitive zoning. So I find it extremely ironic and extremely pathetic that the same people crying about the state law change are the same people who made the change happen because they were going to communities putting in these ridiculous setbacks and ridiculous requirements. So I just want to throw that in there as well.
I can understand about co-ops generating power, but I want to ask a question about the transmission system. Who controls the transmission system? Because if the transition system is amenable to small solar farms and stuff like that, that could really change things a lot. Because rather than just generating for your neighbors, you'd be putting Is that possible, or does DTE and consumers entirely dominate the transmission system?
I can't talk a ton about this because Land and Liberty isn't super involved in transmission, but the issue with transmission right now is the transmission infrastructure we currently have is extremely antiquated and needs to be updated significantly in order to meet our clean energy needs. Just to be able to put the wind and solar that we need to have, the new transmission lines need to be built, and there's a whole issue around that regulation as well through the different systems like MISO, and I don't have time to go into different ISOs, RTO stuff. But that's a question that I think is really important. We need, especially people in here, we need to make an effort to try and promote transmission build out if we want to see the renewable energy future that we're all expecting to see.
Okay, one last question.
Hi, Dr. Cheryl Rubo. I wear an environmental and public health hat as a physician, climate, and you know, I wasn't going to bring this up, and then the issue of manure digesters came up, and that's actually been the focus of my work for the past few years. And generally, most environmentalists, and I think there's a lot of environmentalists here, are opposed to manure digesters, commercial scale, I should say. I'm not talking about the smaller ones for combined heat and power to fuel farms and manage, you know, their methane emissions. I'm talking about the ones where we have corporate investors, DTE, consumers, Chevron, Brightmark, I can name a whole host of them. Anyways, in Michigan, and there are 30, and I've been doing this research, 30 and counting dairy CAFO RNG projects that are either under construction, operational, or planned. And you know, I'm also working with a community in Freedom Township who is facing the prospect of a commercial scale industrial methane production plant with a small dairy farm. They are going to bring in 75 to 80% outside industrial waste. That's introducing more waste. That's not a waste management solution, and when you bring in the industrial waste, we are also introducing new contaminants, PFAS, microplastics, heavy metals. You know, maybe there's a compromise in here, but I felt like the other side of the manure digester coin needed to be presented. Plus, who is pushing for these? Utilities. Okay, manure RNG. There's not enough of it to actually replace natural fossil gas. It's the same thing as natural fossil gas. It's methane. It's a combustion fuel. It burns the same. They put 1 to 5% of it in the natural gas grid, and they call it clean energy. So I just thought that the other side of the story needed to be told.
Thank you. Appreciate that. Okay, well, I know we are all itching to see Bill McKibben. I would like you to stick around for 10 minutes though, because I wanted to talk to you about an Amway distributor opportunity.
Mary Kay.
But otherwise, have a great day. Thank you so much.
But the state of Michigan let me get easier to do that. No, I can read it. Yeah.
Feels good to be back. Does it feel like it's been so long?
Yes.
No, not
Yes, I do. Only thing that is actually a part of
Okay.
last episode.
I will probably have to reach out to him another time because I'm not going to stop in here. But
I like the balance of like the local focus.
Okay. All right. I'll do that. Okay. Sounds good. I know it because I've gone to classes.
I took a little break, but I'm back at it. Are you still in CCL?
Oh, thank you.
I'm so proud.
Yes.
working hard. I don't even know a fraction of what you've done. Jeannie and I were friends when I was in the organization.
Does anyone want me to stop this recording?
Is this a line you're talking? Okay.
Was that like a field development project?
You was actually in town.
So internally, they have their bylaws where they share how we do that, that's how we go. But you know that is a crisis. So what we're trying to do now, this has been done in other states, Iowa, Wisconsin, Illinois, we're doing here. So we're just doing a cooperative sport. Like having their part of the system for machine antagonists, do the ground, doing that research like the business information manager, is in the website.
Go ahead.
And then give us what
I have been in my, as with Citizens Climate Lobby,